Welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show. I'm Steve McAllister. Last month, the Toronto-based Responsible Gambling Council released its 2023-24 annual report. Among the highlights from the report were 32 iGaming sites across 20 operators being accredited through the Council's RG Check program over the past year. Also, the RGC announced that the Ontario government had delivered an unprecedented $9 million investment to the Responsible Internet Gambling Fund over 3 years. To share their insights on those highlights and more, along with the RGC's other efforts around responsible gambling looking ahead to 2024-25, are Chief Executive Officer Shelley White and Elaine McDougall, the RGC's Vice President of Marketing Communications. Shelley and Elaine, thanks so much for being back on the podcast.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks.
Hey, we're going to cover a lot of stuff over the next 30 to 45 minutes. Shelley, we'll start with you, and maybe just for you, some of the other highlights from that annual report that was released last month, and just highlighting the major accomplishments of the Responsible Gambling Council over your past, I guess, fiscal year.
Yeah, sure, Steve. Thanks for asking. First of all, it's, it's a great read. It's a great annual report. The title of it is Impact, Action Drives Change, which is a high priority for RGC. Everything we do, we want to make a difference with respect to advancing responsible play, safer gambling, harm prevention. And we do this in collaboration with our partners like you in the media, government, operators, regulators, game equipment manufacturers, game designers, etc. I mean, it takes a village in order to do this work. So in addition to what you already mentioned in terms of RG Check, and you know what, that has to be underscored. I mean, the fact that we completed 32 iGaming sites across 20 operators is really speaks to one, the commitment that RGC has to this, also the commitment that the operators have to this, the kind of impact that we're having in Ontario with respect to reviewing each operator's responsible gambling strategy and practices. And it doesn't even include all the land-based accreditations that we did as well. It was a very, very busy year for our RG Check team, and I'm really proud of them and the work that they've accomplished, as well as what they've identified in terms of what's working really well in terms of the space, and where there's some opportunities for us to do some more work with operators with respect to continuing to enhance RG, which is the whole purpose of RG Check, is to raise all boats. We are also extremely proud of, and the annual report talks about, the work that we do for OLG in terms of operating the PlaySmart centers. And this year, we had over 500,000 touch points with players, patrons, and venue staff. That is unprecedented. This is significant growth. This is over 67 different locations throughout Ontario, both land-based facilities as well as charitable gaming / bingo sites, and online and working with online. It's 500,000 is huge reach, but I think the other thing that we want to emphasize is the kind of ongoing innovation that occurs within PlaySmart as well. Some of the centers are being redesigned so that they're larger, they're more engaging, that they reflect the communities. Like if I think about Rama and what they've done to work with the Indigenous communities in the Aurelia area to ensure that center reflects the Indigenous culture and beliefs, so extremely important. And then also we launched virtual PlaySmart so that people can access all the services and knowledge that PlaySmart has online as well, as well as initiating with OLG a new program called Boost Your Knowledge, which is all about ensuring that PlaySmart staff and OLG staff have all the latest knowledge and information about responsible gambling, given all the changes that are occurring, so that they can provide the optimal support to players and to venues. And then, we look at, you may have seen our ad, our public service announcement in terms of, gambling school, which tackles the whole concept of illusion control. That particular campaign had over 253 million impressions across traditional and digital media. And this is extremely important in terms of, busting the myth about the illusion of control and letting people know that there is no sure bet. And for that reason, you should never bet more than what you can afford to lose. And there'll be Elaine and her team are working on a brand new public service announcement that's going to launch at the end of November that continues to build upon the success and the knowledge that was imparted through this year's public service announcement and go forward. And then we also completed, our research team. We've got a fantastic research team, extremely knowledgeable, and really rooted in, applied research. And they've completed a marketing and advertising study, which is global, which contains recommendations for regulators and operators about how to approach gambling and marketing policy development and practices that we'll be able to circulate to the industry in the latter part of this year. So those are just a few examples of the kinds of results that RGC's had.
We've been busy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Elaine, geez, I'm glad I'm not taking notes here. I was going to ask you, Elaine, but the marketing communications expert, the PlaySmart centers, like, again, following these openings on LinkedIn and Twitter and through the news releases, like I think kudos to RGC, but also to OLG and the casinos as well. This show we often deal with online gaming, but I think the physical presence of those PlaySmart centers, it almost reminds me of going to the Ontario Science Center, and I know that's not a great thing to bring up these days, but it reminds me of my young years as a teenager going to the Ontario Science Center, and it feels like the PlaySmart Center is just one of those things that even if you're going to play the slots for an evening or watch the horse races or whatever, that you'll take a walk in there because it actually is a pretty cool physical environment that's been created in those places.
You know what, Steve? That's funny that you should say that because way back when the PlaySmart centers, they were responsible gambling resource centers that were converted to PlaySmart centers. And this was probably 10, 12, I don't know, many years ago. And I worked on the team that was doing the rebrand of those centers. And the whole idea was Starbucks meets Science Center. And so the idea was that this was a place, and it still is, a place where you can go that is welcoming, that you can go and have a coffee, that you can take in information, but in a non-threatening or a non-judgmental way, right? So there's, ads playing on the TVs in there in terms of, messaging and information. There's, games that people can play. And so the idea really is to have an immersive experience in there. I think, and OLG has done a fantastic job of that, and so have our staff. When I think about our staff that works in kind of these 67 locations across the province, these people come from a range of backgrounds. We're talking social services, psychology, addictions, social work, and from a variety of different ethnocultural backgrounds. And so they really represent the community, but they are so well trained. So they go through rigorous training, motivational interviewing, that they are able to connect with players across the entire player spectrum, the journey. And so somebody could come in and just, asking, about having a cup of coffee, and just, through conversation, our team is able to identify what are the needs of that player. Do they want more information on how to play safer, how they can minimize risk, or are they looking just to talk and have a conversation? So yeah, those PlaySmart centers are really valuable resources, I think, both for the players, but also the staff and the communities in each of those locations.
Steve, I'm so glad that Elaine talked about the staff. And the other characteristic that I would just like to add is empathetic. And, there's a lot of conversations, post-COVID about the importance of empathetic leadership and support. And another example of an initiative that was implemented last year that was talked about in the annual report is our check-in calls. This was something new. And this was about, when individuals make the decision to take a break or self-exclude, the staff give them the option to have a check-in call within a couple of weeks. And the uptake of that has been very, very high, which is fantastic. And then the outcomes have been very successful as well in terms of, you can think about, when you make that decision to self-exclude for whatever reason it is, the fact that somebody is following up with you to see how you're doing in terms of achieving your goals, fulfilling the reason why you did self-exclude, and just show that they care. And for some individuals, the only person they've told that they've self-excluded is the person in the PlaySmart Center. And so to be able to have that kind of connection and follow-up is so important. And then they're going to take PlaySmart one step further in the charitable gaming bingo facilities as well. And given the kinds of changes that have occurred that have taken place within the bingo halls, that they're going to be augmenting the kind of PlaySmart support that's provided in those facilities as well. So, really important and, trending kinds of changes that are occurring that are once again aligned with the kinds of changes that are occurring in terms of player behavior as well as the industry.
Yeah, I'll ask both of you this question, and if people will point to the rise in problem gambling, and we know that's obviously a concern, and we'll also hear at the same time that there one of the things that you can attribute to that rise in knowing about problem gambling is because there is so much information and education out there now, and people are more aware of the fact that there are resources. Elaine, maybe I'll start with you. Like, how do you balance that? And I guess I probably phrased this question a bit awkwardly, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
Well, I think there is a lot more information that's out there now in terms of driving people to Connects Ontario, more so than there's ever been. And so I think that's a good thing. And it doesn't have to be, when we look at the calls to Connects, or when we look at, we're getting, increased traffic to our website in terms of how to minimize risk and support pages. It's hard to identify exactly where it's coming from if these are people that are curious about this new resource that they're seeing on TV or online. There is a lot more awareness now of resources for Ontarians. And I think that's important. I think it's really important that people have access to this information, whether we can attribute it to, all of the traffic to our site in terms of a rise of problem gambling, or just, awareness of we can't say, but we do know that it's a good thing that people are accessing this information. Our website has, the how to find a treatment provider anywhere in the world. If we, when we get calls from or requests from people to help them find a resource, doesn't matter if whether it's Ontario or Canada, the US or global, we reach out to our network and we try and find that information, and then we put it up on our website for others to have. So I think it's important that all of these people have access to this information. And so, the more advertising that's out there that's also encouraging people to reach out and ask their questions and get help, I think is important.
Shelley, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Steve, what I would add is that these are conversations that we have within our GC and with our key stakeholders in Ontario a lot about, the increased risk and our collective significant concern about increases in gambling disorders. And that's why it's extremely important that collectively we have a responsible gambling strategy in the province that we're contributing to collectively to ensure that there is a safer gambling ecosystem in Ontario. And I'm happy to say that, we do have a very collaborative approach in this province, and that there is a collective commitment to reducing gambling harms and reducing the number of individuals with gambling disorders. And that means, the work that we do, from the prevention education perspective, in terms of ensuring young people, adults, seniors have the knowledge that they need in order to understand what the risks are and how to mitigate those risks by using responsible gambling tools, increasing the utilization of responsible gambling tools, and ensuring that there's the appropriate amount of resources funding invested in prevention education, support, treatment, and RG, and that includes RG messaging, and links to the supports that are available to people that are easily accessible. This is our raison d'etre. This is why we exist, and it's a big job. But RGC has a fantastic team that is extremely committed to ensuring that we continue to, optimize the safer gambling environment.
Shelley, I think that probably ties in a bit to the $9 million investment that the government's making to the Responsible Internet Gambling Fund. And again, I've been fairly critical on this platform. I don't think the government's done a good enough job telling that story of the money the tax revenue that's coming in and how that money has been invested. Can you maybe just put a little bit more meat on the bone on how that $9 million will be allocated over the 3 years?
Yeah. So Elaine and her team, who are responsible for the development of, prevention education and community outreach, have developed a very comprehensive responsible internet gambling strategy for that $9 million over the next 3 years. So it's $3 million a year for the next 3 years. And we truly hope and expect that money will become ongoing. It will become evergreen. But I'd like Elaine to elaborate on it, because it was her and her team that did the research and did the heavy lifting with respect to developing that strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. Steve, this goes back, 20 plus years that RGC has been receiving funding from the Ministry of Health. And there is a commitment to prevention education in that space here in Ontario. We deliver programs that are designed to inform those who gamble and their families and communities about the risks of gambling, what are the signs of a problem, how to access support. And so those programs, all evidence informed for the last 20 years, we have been creating information and campaigns and programming specific to higher risk populations. So like Shelley said, youth, young adults, there are certain ethnocultural populations that are more at risk. And so when, I guess it's 5-6 years ago now, when the government announced their plans to expand the regulated market here in Ontario, RGC saw this as there was an important need, and we couldn't, I think, we would not be able to fulfill all the work that we were doing just in land-based and add online into it, because online, in terms of prevention education, online, there are a unique set of risks. There are unique audiences, profiles of people who are at risk. And so we began the kind of process of meeting with the government to share with them kind of the concerns that we had. And these were concerns from RGC, but also there was a collective, the stakeholders that we were talking to, the community agencies. There was a collective concern that we needed to build a safety net in terms of education and programming. And so, for years we met with the government, and they were receptive to it. They understood the need for this and the good work that RGC had been doing to create that awareness level and that information, or deliver that information in Ontario. So, when we heard the announcement, the $9 million over 3 years, we were ecstatic, because this really provides us with the increased funding to do so much of what needs to be done. So right now we are, like Shelley said, we are, creating a new PSA, and it'll have, this year we're able to do 2 versions, kind of one for sports betting and one for igaming, that kind of address those unique needs. We are working on creating more programming specific to the stakeholders that we work with, the community. So capacity building in the communities, training. We're doing a lot more training. Schools are reaching out to us. Community agencies like Caribbean Vibrations. We're doing some work there with them in terms of education because we're seeing a risk in that community when it comes to gambling harms around sports betting. And so this $9 million of funding is allowing us to create the programming that we need to create to increase the amount of advertising. I don't want to say advertising. We don't want to increase the amount of advertising. We want to make sure that the right messaging is out there. And, you and I talk this noise when it comes to kind of the responsible gambling advertising that's out there. RGC, what we're trying to do is to separate ourselves from that and really lean in on kind of what are those risks and how do you protect yourself from risk. Not about, it's not so much about, so you can, keep the fun, but it's about being aware of what those risks are and what are the strategies that you need to put in place to keep yourself safe. So it's a very nuanced kind of area that RGC lives in when it comes to our prevention education, but it's incredibly important. And so, this $9 million in funding that we received from the Ontario government will go a long way in terms of establishing that culture of safer play and making sure that the different communities and the different age groups have access to the right information they need in order to keep themselves safe.
That's great. Hey, Shelley, I do want to mention the Discovery Conference is included in the annual report. And again, there's this industry has lots of, I guess, glitzy and glamorous conferences, the ICE event in London. SBC just completed its first conference in Lisbon. I believe you and Elaine were both out in Las Vegas last week at the Global Gaming Expo, and there are so many other conferences out there that kind of fly under the radar a bit, including Discovery. This past year's Discovery Conference is your last as the CEO of Responsible Gambling Council. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the podcast, but maybe just quickly, just how that conference has evolved, Shelley, and how you would like to see it continue to evolve moving forward.
Sure. So, Discovery is not about glitz and glamour. It's about content. It's a very bespoke conference. We're not looking at attracting 25,000 people. We're looking at attracting, responsible gambling leaders who are interested in learning about the current trends in responsible gambling, having the opportunity to discuss these trends, learn from each other so that together, collaboratively, we can advance responsible gambling within Ontario, Canada, and globally. And, we were thrilled that last year we had over 350 leaders from around the world, both in person and online, mostly in person. And that the subject matter was about responsible gambling in the gambling industry, considering all the changes that are taking place and ensuring that we are understanding the impacts of the changes in the technology, political, social, demographic changes, and the kind of impact that they're having, and how we need to take that information and apply it to RG strategies going forward so that we continue to enhance this. And my expectation, and when I say expectation, I mean that is because it's based on conversations with Elaine and Tracy and others in the organization who are involved in the strategy for Discovery is that this kind of focus is going to continue, and that this particular event is going to continue to attract RG leaders, and it's going to continue to inform and provide that thought leadership in terms of what is required with respect to responsible gambling going forward, whether it's research, training, prevention education, and both B2B and B2C, even in terms of policy development, so that we can learn from each other, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can establish some best practices that can be adopted globally to ensure that we are providing people with the best player health information possible. But I know that, Elaine and Tracy are leading the team on the development of Discovery 2025. I've already been invited to attend it. It's going to take place in May of next year, May 20th to 22nd. And I know that Elaine and the team have already been discussing the kinds of topics that are going to be explored there. So Elaine, elaborate on that.
Yeah, we're in the early days of content development, Steve. Our plan as always is to take fresh perspectives. We know there are a lot of conferences out there, and what we don't want is people to come and sit there and think, I've seen this presentation before. And that's why each of the sessions is really carefully curated to take, we'll take a topic, let's say AI, for example, and we'll bring multiple perspectives in on it. So it's not just one presentation about a product or software that's available or a program that's done well. It's, having a conversation about that with maybe community agencies who can bring in the perspective of the individual and can share kind of the concerns that they have. It's about, operators and regulators and creating healthy tensions in the conversation so that we can ultimately look to advance our work collectively. I mean, that's always the goal. It's not just about kind of, sharing of information. That's one piece of it, but it's the dialogue and it's the being able to kind of have conversations about the issues that are important, the latest research and trends, so that we can kind of debate it and tackle that and find solutions together. Like Shelley said, we are, the Discovery will take place May 20th to the 22nd. The registration will open later this fall, kind of, it'll be probably December by that point. We are launching our sponsorship drive in the next week. And so anybody who's interested should reach out to Shelley or I. We're happy to have a conversation with them about how they can get involved with Discovery. But we're looking forward to it. It will be another great year. We'll miss Shelley up on stage, but maybe we'll be able to get her up there if she comes.
Yeah.
No.
And listen, Shelley, I hope that's a free registration too. I hope you're not giving your credit
A reduced rate
out to the RGC. Oh, there you go. There you go. Hey, when we talk about issues, and I'm going to start with you on this one, Elaine, and before we hit the record button, we were just talking about, responsible gambling. Everybody, yes, is very, very important. There's an awful lot of messaging out there from every stakeholder in the gambling industry. And, we know the operators, when you sign up as a customer for a sportsbook account or an igaming account, there's responsible gambling programs and processes in there. And we know advocates like the Canadian Gaming Association and the American Gaming Association have their own messaging around responsible gambling. And we know that the suppliers have their own RG messaging. Regulators have their own messaging, and obviously the Responsible Gambling Council, that's your raison d'etre. How, for the people that say there's so much clutter, is the messaging really getting out there? I guess the simple question is, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I think it takes a collective in order to change behavior, right? And it takes the information and the messaging and the tools to come from all of us in the sector, all of us in the community, to be able to share our own messages of safety. And, when the consumers have that kind of surrounding them and this message of safer play and safety and how to access that, it helps to create that culture, that culture of responsibility and safer play and harm minimization that we want. That said, when RGC is working on our prevention programs and our campaigns, It's we do ask that question when we do our market research. We do ask that question when we're testing our creative to see if people see this as yet another message that's out there in terms of promoting gambling, right? Because if it's a gambling message in the media, people are going to think it's promoting, even if it's a harm reduction message. And so we're very careful about how we position ourselves. For the last couple of years, we have done a bit of a competitive review every year of looking at the different advertising that's out there and seeing what the nature of the messages are. And for the first little while, and it continues to be, you'll see a lot of messages, operator messages around digital tool usage. Right. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want people to be doing. We want people to be using the digital tools on the platforms. So from an RGC perspective, we're not about using the digital tools in terms of promoting that as a main campaign message. We want people to use them. But for RGC, our territory in terms of the messaging is about how people can be aware of what are the risks of gambling, what are some of those the bigger risks or myths that people have around gambling, and how can we go up against those? How can we make people see that there is a risk with the illusion of control, and what are the practices that they can put in place to protect themselves? So last year's campaign, The Illusion of Control, was an important one. This year, the work that we're doing will build off of that in terms of understanding how randomness can affect how randomness affects gambling and what you should be doing to protect yourself and not over betting. And so, I think RGC has a unique role to play in this space because we can lean a little bit more deeply into kind of some of those bigger risks that come with gambling, all with the intention of getting people to develop their safe play practices or access support if they need support to get help with their gambling.
Elaine, I may follow up with you. It's probably a good time to mention your new partnership with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And unfortunately, I missed it. I was at a wedding in Cambridge on the weekend, so I missed watching the Leafs home opener. But a kind of I guess a watershed moment for Responsible Gambling Council to be featured on Hockey Night in Canada in some way.
It was pretty exciting. Our whole team, everybody was watching. So we have been working with the MLSE now for the last year. We did some training with their marketing team and partnership teams, sales teams, which was fantastic. They were all really interested in understanding kind of, what's the unique profile of a sports bettor? What do they need to be aware of? They're very invested in developing responsible gambling practices in terms of how they do their work. And so part of that, their responsibility and part of the work that they've been doing is, we've established this partnership where we will be providing them with content that they will share across their platform. So on site at, hockey games and Raptors and so we're really excited about this partnership. So the first kickoff, I should say, puck drop happened this weekend. The home opener in the first period, you saw RGC messaging across the boards, which we were absolutely thrilled about. And so for the rest of the season, at various games, people will be able to see, responsible gambling advertising or RGC messaging when they're watching their favorite games. So we're really excited.
Hey, Shelley, I think it's important too when you see these organizations like an MLSE, they're doing multi-partnerships with sportsbook and iGaming operators, that they're taking a vested interest in responsible gambling messaging as well.
Yeah, they play, they're another key stakeholder. The sports leagues are another important stakeholder. And we know that they're very, given their audience, given their fan base, that they know that it's, families, young kids, etc. And they want to ensure that they're also playing their role in terms of promoting responsible play to their fans. They want it to be part of a healthy experience. And we're happy to be partners them to help them in the development and implementation of that strategy.
Probably a good time, Shelley, to bring up, you spoke to the Senate's Committee on Transport and Communications a couple of weeks ago. We had Paul Burns on the podcast a couple of episodes ago. talking about the push in the Senate for a bill to create a national framework for advertising on sports betting. I wonder if you can just kind of give our listeners the Sparks Note version of your testimony to the committee.
Yeah, we felt that it was important, Steve, for RGC to weigh in and to communicate our message about the importance of there being a consistent commitment to, well-developed communication and marketing policies and standards across the country. Absolutely imperative. And, we don't need to reinvent the wheel in terms of the development of those policies and standards. They should be evidence informed. You want to ensure that every Canadian has access to high quality. And, there's, we know that, advertisements, cross all borders. And so that consistency is extremely important. And so that's what we talked about, the importance of there being robust marketing and advertising standards in every single jurisdiction in Canada for all Canadians, so they have equal access to that information. And that was really the essence of our message.
I think, Elaine, too, we have seen, and I know you follow this closely, and including through the relationship with Think TV, that there has been, as we all, I think we all knew it would happen, that there was this incredible rush of advertising when the market opened in Ontario in April 2022, and we knew that those types of marketing and advertising dollars, I know you as a marketer, you would like there to be a never-ending flow of money, but at some point, the fiscal sanity has to be front and center, and we have seen a dropping off of advertising, and I think we all knew that this day would come.
For sure. And I think there's the broadcast advertising, and I think that was the biggest one for people to all of a sudden see it everywhere. And it was a new form, because previous to that in Ontario, OLG had advertising around lottery, and casino gaming here and there, but it wasn't to the degree of what we were seeing with the new operators coming in. And it was, it really broke through from a consumer standpoint. So people were seeing it. And so we know that there was a lot of public concern around the volume. We are seeing it go down. I think from a digital aspect, I think it's really important to make sure that people are, there's a lot of ads online, making sure that, the micro-targeting and people are getting targeted with these ads, and making sure that there is a framework in place to protect all of those, who are being exposed to this advertising. So making sure that the advertising is being done in an ethical way, that the volume of advertising is managed, and so that we're not seeing vulnerable populations being inundated with advertising. And I think that there is a collective. I think everybody wants to do the right thing. When we talk to operators, when we're talking to the government and different stakeholders, MLSE is the perfect example of that, and seeing that they would be taking on operator, there would be operator advertising around the game. So what can they be doing from a responsible gambling perspective? So I think the collective out there wants to see this managed in a way that is a demonstration of safety.
Elaine, you mentioned artificial intelligence a few minutes ago, and I know Shelley's mentioned before we started the show that it was a topic that came up at G2E, which it comes up at every conference now. But Elaine, I might just start with you, like just your thoughts on AI and the opportunities that it presents for RGC or for RG messaging in general.
Well, and actually that's interesting, because we are literally having that conversation right after this conversation today at our EMT meeting. And so RGC is, we have a committee, a team on our staff right now who's doing our investigations and looking at what is the opportunity here from an RGC perspective in terms of what we need to be doing and how we need to be delivering. I think anything that will allow us as a collective, operators, and the community, to be able to connect with players and minimize harm, by understanding what their behaviors are, by being able to predict what is the right message to be able to help people manage their play, and understand when they might need more support. I think it's incredibly important. I think from an RGC perspective, we are working right now on identifying what is the right role for us to be playing in this space. Shelley, anything to add there?
Yeah, well, last week, Steve, I was on a panel at G2E with Dr. Michael Auer and Dr. Kazra Garmanian and Diani Marvel about AI and the intersection with RG, and a few things that we talked about. One, it has tremendous promise in terms of early detection, in terms of being able to analyze all the player data that's available and identifying what the indicators of harm are, and developing classifications of players. And then, as Elaine said, developing the right customer engagement messaging in order to prevent that individual from moving into low risk, into a moderate or high risk. And but what is needed is, in terms of going forward, is transparency and literacy around AI and ensuring that everybody understands what it is. That includes regulators as well as the public, and that there's principles that are being established to ensure those safeguards are in place, and that there's ongoing research being conducted to ensure that we're taking the right approach to the development of algorithms and the right approach to data analytics to prevent any kind of bias, and that there is a real need, in addition to organizations like RGC being educated and informed and determining what our lane is with respect to this. It's also important for regulators to become informed so that they can establish the right regulatory standards around this.
Hey, I want to ask quickly, we can't do a podcast these days without mentioning Alberta. I mean, if we did chat GBT and did Gambling Canada, I'm sure Alberta would pop up automatically. But Shelley, maybe just start with you. I assume that Responsible Gambling Council has more than a passing interest in what might happen in Alberta.
Sure. We want to ensure that there's a, robust regulatory framework in place for every single jurisdiction in Canada. And if a jurisdiction like Alberta is considering making a change to how it conducts iGaming, we want to be at the table. And I'm really pleased to say that we've had very positive and productive meetings with Minister Nally's office and his deputy minister, Stephanie Clark, and other Alberta leaders. We are really encouraged by their commitment to responsible gambling. And they are leaning on RGC in terms of providing guidance around what those regulatory standards should be and what the practices are, the kind of investment that needs to be made, both from a prevention education, but also from a treatment perspective. And so they're looking at it from a comprehensive point of view. And we look forward to ongoing discussions and in terms of helping them to develop this. But of course, they know that they've got, Ontario's experience has been very positive. There are excellent regulatory standards in place. And so they can utilize those and then attach to it and adapt it for the Alberta culture that exists.
And Elaine, just for you wearing your marketing communications hat, I mean, how do you follow what's going on in Alberta?
Well, like Shelley said, you know what? We've been having good conversations with them, and we'll continue to do so. I think Alberta, the gambling marketing and advertising, is obviously a concern nationally. And so we have heard from partners in Alberta that they are actually, interestingly, wanting access to the PSAs and the work that we're doing, and wanting to have more of that information in Alberta. And so, we'll be, continuing those conversations so that we can, make sure that there is the right prevention messaging and the communities have access to that information the same way, that they have in Ontario. So hopefully we'll be able to do more work there as well.
Want to definitely talk about, before we let you both go, about it was announced back in June that Shelley would be leaving her position at the end of the year, and Shelley, just first of all, I mean, congratulations on having an 8-year run as CEO of an organization. That's pretty impressive in today's world to be able to have done that and to put together the team that you've have and to have had the success that you've had. I guess it's a cliche question, but I just wonder, is there one achievement or one thing that's happened with RGC that you're most proud of over those 8 years?
I'm Steve. I have to say, I'm proud of the whole experience. The last 8 years have just been remarkable. And to have the opportunity to work with the extraordinary team at RGC, the board, the staff, our partners, including you, and I think, to move the needle in terms of the acknowledgement of how important responsible gambling is, and to see all the stakeholders take this so seriously. That's what we've seen RG is not just, is not siloed. It is considered an imperative in terms of policy development, standards, strategy, and is embedded. And so I'm really, really proud of that and what we've all done collectively to advance this. And I'm really excited for RGC's future. I am confident that there is going to be another strong leader who will continue to come in and will continue to advance responsible gambling within Ontario and Canada and globally. And I'm excited to see all the exciting work that they're going to do over the next 30 or so years.
I know this is a tough question because Shelley's on the screen here, but just your thoughts on the job that Shelley has done and just how far the organization has come. And again, it's a job where you wear a lot of different hats. I mean, there's obviously a big fundraising or attracting investment dollars component to this. It's not always easy when you're dealing with governments. It's a very it's a very busy industry with a lot of different stakeholders, as we talked about earlier. And then I think Shelley mentioned empathy earlier on, and as someone who's managed teams, in the past for a long period of time, I think we've learned that empathy is a very important facet of leadership and something that probably wasn't appreciated nearly enough 20 years ago. But I did want to give you the floor just to talk about the impact that Shelley's had on the organization, because she'll be too humble to do that.
She will. Shelley, I joined RGC about a year after Shelley joined. And so I've been along for the ride for, pretty much her tenure. And the work that Shelley has done within the organization and outside of the organization in terms of bringing people together, the demonstration of humanity. Humanity is one of our core values, and you see it in everything that Shelley does, that it's, her constant focus on the work, but for the betterment of society and the betterment of the people that we're doing this for. Shelley really came into RGC and, just initiated an entire culture shift in terms of bringing everybody together and understanding how collectively all of our role works together, whether we are working with communities and prevention education, with operators or research, the treatment community, that collectively everything that we are doing is to create that safer space for people. And you see it in our work, which has the innovation that has been seen at RGC over the last 8 years under Shelley's leadership is amazing. Not just, our prevention programs have completely innovated, the research, the work that we're doing, training that we're doing with different stakeholders, our work globally, discovery, absolutely everything that we have done has been a complete overhaul since Shelley started. And so, I think there's big shoes for, the next person to come in and fill, because Shelley has done a remarkable job. We have a very strong team in place, again, under Shelley's leadership, a very strong leadership team, but also, across the organization, in our Toronto office, RG Check has grown, research, our prevention programming, PlaySmart. and all of the PlaySmart centers across Ontario, we have a deeply committed staff. And that's, largely due to the, Shelley's leadership and the vision that she had for the organization. So we will miss her, but we know that she's not far. She'll probably be on a ski slope. And so we know how to access her, but she'll be at our discoveries.
Shelley, you mentioned too earlier that again before we started the podcast that the expectation is that there will be a successor named before the end of the year.
Yes, yeah. I expect that given the updates from the board of directors who have done a masterful job of managing this search along with Promeus, that there'll be an announcement at the end of this month, so that there's some opportunity for me to have some overlap with the new CEO. The whole organization is working collectively on a transition plan for the new CEO so that it will be a very smooth and successful transition as well, so that RGC doesn't miss a beat during this changeover.
Hey, Elaine, you know that we'll be bugging you when that new CEO is in place to get them on the podcast, but we'll let them get their feet wet before.
Right, hey, give them a couple weeks.
For sure. Hey, last question, because I know Elaine's got her AI meeting, but I just want to ask both of you, just, it sounds like a tired subject, but I think it's an important one to raise. And, we had two women executives on this podcast today. We had Jess Wellman on the previous podcast. We have Dr. Karen Schneider now in place leading the Alcohol and Gaming Commission Ontario. Martha Otten is retiring as Executive Director of iGaming Ontario at the end of the year. It does feel, and I mean, I've only been covering this industry for a little more than 3 years, but it even feels in that short period of time to me that there's been a shift in the right direction with regards to the opportunities there are for women in this industry, and just conferences are no longer about scantily clad women walking around hawking a product or whatever. That there's it just feels to me now that there's a real nice blend of men and women and who are CEOs and come from the executive suite, and that the industry has taken some steps in the right direction from them. Elaine, I'll give you first shot at this, and I'll give the last word to Shelley.
I think it's a really positive move to see that when you see so many strong women, especially here in Canada and definitely here in Ontario, strong women in leadership roles. And that paves the way for other women who are coming up through the ranks to see that and know that there is opportunity, that there are mentors, that there are role models out there. I'll just share quickly a funny story. We had a young person join our team on RG Check, and they came to the first Canadian Gaming, the summit last June. And he looked around, and he was new to the sector. He had just joined us maybe a few months in, and came to the Canadian Gaming Summit and looked around and said, "There are so many men here. I thought this was more of a female-dominated sector." And so it was. We all had a good laugh at that. And but it's true, because in Ontario and the work that we've been doing, there are so many strong women, and I think that's a really positive thing to say. I think there is a nice collaboration between men and women in this sector. I think there's more of a emphasis on working together, and so we do our part by having we have a pretty strong female leadership team right now.
Shelley, I give the last word to you.
Yeah, thanks for raising this, Steve. This is a really important issue, and I don't think it should get tired. And I think we need to continue to talk about this. Yes, there's initiatives like Global Gaming Women and All in Diversity, and the initiative that Kelly Ken and Sue Schneider are leading in terms of SHEOs, SHEOs is a WhatsApp group that's comprised of over 150 female CEOs from around the world. And so, yes, great progress is being made as a result of these initiatives. And the great news is that this is a common priority for both men and women in the industry. And it's not just, it includes women, but it also includes diversity as well, which is another important spoke in this as well, because, diversity amongst the leadership leads to diversity of thought. And this industry is rapidly changing, as we all know. And that diversity of leadership and thought is so imperative in terms of the development of the right strategies that are an innovation and this human-centric kind of approach that we talked about earlier. And I'm really inspired by it. It gives me great hope. And I have to say, when I come back, coming back from G2E and having seen the announcement of the new 40 under 40 and seeing how many of them are women, but also I think that one of the characteristics of all of the men and women in terms of 40 under 40 is how smart and committed they are to responsible gambling and to ensuring that we create a safer gambling ecosystem globally. And that is ultimately what our goal is.
Very, very well said. Let's leave it there. I just want to thank you, Shelley. You've been a great resource to Gaming News Canada since we launched back in February 2021. You're always gracious with your time, and you've introduced me to people at conferences, and so I'm really appreciative of what you've done to help me, and I'm wishing you very, very well in retirement. Certainly don't plan on us not continuing to talk, and it might actually be fun to get you back on the podcast as a bit of an outsider once your retirement does kick in, but we definitely want to get you back on the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, and I appreciate all the excellent work that you're doing within the industry to advance responsible gambling and all the other important priorities that you have spoken about. So thank you very, very much. We really value our work with you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Shelley. And thank you, Elaine McDougall, for coming back on the podcast, and the Vice President of Marketing Communications for the Responsible Gambling Council. Elaine, always great to talk to you, and I know that will continue. And again, thank you for all the help you provide with Gaming News Canada.
Definitely looking forward to the next time. Thanks, Steve.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. As always, you can find us on Substack at gamingnewscanada.ca and also on the various podcast platforms. Again, thanks to Shelley White and Elaine McDougall from the Responsible Gambling Council for joining us today, and we will see everybody again very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Gaming News Canada show. Sign up for our newsletter at gamingnewscanada.ca. Follow Steve McAllister on LinkedIn. Message Steve if you're interested in being a sponsor or featured guest.